Khabib Nurmagomedov. When was the last time you saw a champion leap off the cage to fistfight an entire entourage? That's what Khabib did on the biggest night in UFC history. It was October 6th, 2018, UFC 229, Las Vegas. The numbers alone were a staggering 2.4 million pay-per-views sold, the highest in UFC's 30-year existence. The build-up? Straight up nuclear. Conor McGregor insulted Khabib's father, religion, nationality, called him a backwards coward, even threw a dolly through a bus window, costing the UFC $2 million in injury payouts and nearly canceling the card. But the real meltdown came after the fight. When Khabib tapped Conor with a fourth-round neck crank, you'd think that was closure. It wasn't. Khabib screamed at Conor's cornerman Dylan Dennis, then jumped over the fence and started throwing punches into the crowd. Seconds later, Khabib's teammates vaulted into the octagon and began sucker punching McGregor. Thousands of fans scrambled for the exits. T-Mobile Arena locked the cage, and security flooded in. Over 60 guards were deployed to control the chaos. The Nevada Athletic Commission issued Khabib a $500,000 fine and a 9-month suspension, the largest penalty ever given to a winning champion. McGregor was fined $50,000. This incident forced the UFC to rewrite post-fight security protocols. Now, every main event has extra barriers, triple security presence, and lockdown policies the second the fight ends. Ask yourself, if you'd just won the biggest fight of your life, could you resist the urge to jump that fence? Brock Lesnar. Imagine this. You retire, sit on your couch for 5 years, and come back with a UFC contract that waives your drug testing window. That's exactly what Brock Lesnar did. It was 2016. UFC 200 was falling apart. Jon Jones failed a drug test, and Daniel Cormier needed a big-name opponent. Dana White called Brock Lesnar, who was still under WWE contract. Brock agreed, on one condition. He didn't want to wait the standard 4-month USADA testing re-entry period. UFC granted him a special exemption. Lesnar signed on June 4th and fought Mark Hunt July 9th, just 35 days later. In those 5 weeks, USADA tested him 6 times. The 6th test, taken 1 day before the fight, came back positive for clomiphene, a banned estrogen blocker often used to cycle off steroids. But because results weren't processed until after UFC 200, Brock still fought and earned $2.5 million in disclosed pay. Mark Hunt, his opponent, later sued the UFC for fraud and racketeering, claiming the company knowingly let a chemically enhanced heavyweight into the cage. The fallout? Massive. USADA quickly removed the special exemption clause, enforcing a strict 4-month testing window for all returning fighters, no exceptions. Hunt's lawsuit dragged on for 6 years and was partially settled out of court in 2023. Ask yourself this. What does it say about the sport when the biggest payday of the year came from a fight that, by every measure, should have never been sanctioned? But that's what makes the next example even crazier. Because it wasn't modern steroids or a riot. It was bare-knuckle eye gouges, hair pulling, and groin punches so raw they looked medieval. Travis Browne. You've probably seen the highlight reels, fighters getting jabbed in the eye, wincing, waving off the fight. But nobody did it more infamously than Travis Browne. From 2013 to 2016, Browne became notorious for a defensive move commentators nicknamed the T-bone defense. He'd keep his massive palms outstretched with fingers straight ahead, like a spear aimed at your cornea. Every time someone tried to close distance, he'd stiff-arm their face and catch an eye socket. The worst came at UFC 181 against Brendan Schaub. Browne repeatedly stuck his fingers into Schaub's eyes so many times that referee Mario Yamasaki didn't even deduct a point. Just warnings. Schaub later said in interviews, "I couldn't see for 2 rounds. I was literally fighting blind." It wasn't an isolated incident. In earlier fights with Gabriel Gonzaga and Alistair Overeem, Browne poked so often that fighters demanded rule changes. Gonzaga's eye was red and swollen for weeks. After Browne's string of pokes, the UFC and Nevada Commission made it official. Extended fingers toward the opponent's face equals immediate warning and potential point deduction. Referees were trained to stop action mid-round to enforce it. New glove prototypes were even tested to curve fingers into a semi-closed position. If you're wondering why modern refs keep yelling, "Close your hands," you can thank Travis Browne's open palm jab. But while Browne was annoying, the next man was a legend. who used the fence like a third arm to keep his belt. Anderson Silva. How do you stop a Division I wrestler from taking you down? If you were Anderson Silva, you just grabbed the fence like it was your best friend. Silva wasn't just a striker. He was a tactician who knew exactly how to bend the rules without snapping them. In his title defense against Chael Sonnen at UFC 117, Silva repeatedly stuffed takedowns by grabbing the octagon fence. Watch the replays. You'll see Silva's left hand hooking the mesh seconds before Sonnen's double leg would have landed. According to the official stats, Chael controlled over 20 minutes of that fight. But imagine if 2 or 3 of those takedowns had been clean. Instead, Silva used the fence to bounce back up, reset, and finally secure a triangle armbar with 150 left in the 5th round. It wasn't the first time. Silva also grabbed the cage against Dan Henderson, Yushin Okami, and Travis Lutter. The habit forced the Nevada Commission to issue stricter instructions to referees. Fence grabbing must result in immediate positional warnings and potential point deductions. Referees began stopping action to physically peel fingers off the fence, something that never happened before Silva's reign. Joe Rogan famously quipped, "That fence is undefeated." Think about it. Silva may be the greatest middleweight ever, but he also taught the UFC that if you don't enforce the rules, champions will find the cracks. Keith Hackney. Imagine this. You're in a cage, a guy mounts you, and then he punches you in the testicles until you tap out. That's literally what happened on live TV. In UFC 4, Keith Hackney, a Kenpo karate specialist with fists like bricks, faced Joe Son, a 5'4" brawler who outweighed him by over 50 pounds. Hackney tried to ground and pound from mount, but Son latched onto his arm with a guillotine choke. He was stuck, couldn't break the hold. So what did Hackney do? He cocked his right fist and started hammer fisting Joe Son's groin. Not once, not twice, over 20 times in rapid succession. You can watch the footage. Son tries to squirm, but Hackney keeps blasting away until Son verbally submits. The crowd roared. The commentary was stunned silent, and the ref? He had no idea if that was legal, because back then, the UFC had basically no rules. The official tagline was literally, "There are no rules." After the event, the backlash was instant. Athletic commissions refused to license future shows unless groin strikes were explicitly banned. UFC President Art Davie was forced to add Rule 12, no groin attacks in the official rulebook. Later in interviews, Hackney shrugged and said, "I was going to hit something until he let go." Let's be real. Few moments are as absurd and iconic. But what if I told you there was a fighter who gouged eyes so brazenly that commissions demanded new language banning it forever? Gerard Gordeau. You think eye pokes today are bad. In UFC 1, Gerard Gordeau literally dug his fingers into a man's eye socket on purpose and kept doing it. Gordeau was a Dutch savate champion who looked like a Bond villain. In the very first UFC tournament in 1993, he faced Taylor Tooley, a 400-pound sumo wrestler. Gordeau front-kicked Tooley's face so hard, it knocked out 3 of his teeth, one tooth embedded in Gordeau's foot, where it stayed during the entire event. But the bigger scandal came in the finals. Against Royce Gracie, Gordeau couldn't stop Gracie's takedowns. So, he did the unthinkable. He shoved his thumb into Royce's eye socket repeatedly. Gracie never let go of the GE choke. He later told reporters, "I saw black. I thought my eye was gone." Even with one eye nearly closed, Royce choked Gordeau unconscious in 1 minute and 44 seconds. After the fight, Royce was rushed to a hospital for orbital damage. Gordeau, he calmly admitted to reporters that he did it intentionally. This was the moment the UFC realized they couldn't just say, "No biting, no eye gouging," as a suggestion. The Nevada State Athletic Commission demanded Rule 7, no eye gouging of any kind, adding instant disqualification and lifetime bans for repeat offenders. For context, modern UFC gloves are designed to reduce eye pokes, but in 1993, you could literally claw someone's vision away with no automatic penalty. Insane, right? But before we finish, let's visit the man who forced the biggest evolution of all: time limits, rounds, and everything that made MMA modern. Royce Gracie. Imagine fighting one man for 36 minutes straight. No breaks, no rounds, no water. Royce Gracie didn't just win UFC 1, he broke the format forever. When the Gracie family entered the first UFC in 1993, they had one goal: prove Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu could beat any style. Royce weighed 178 pounds, wore a GI, and fought 3 times in one night. But the real shock came in UFC 5 when he faced Ken Shamrock in the super fight. That fight went an exhausting 36 minutes of grappling. No time limits, no rounds, no rest. The only reason it ended was because the pay-per-view broadcast ran out of satellite time. The referee, Big John McCarthy, literally had no protocol for stopping the stalemate. Viewers were furious. Critics called it human Velcro. The athletic commissions demanded that UFC UFC either adopt rounds or face permanent banning. Result? The UFC created one 30-minute round with a 5-minute overtime, the first real-time limit in MMA. Eventually, it evolved into 3 5-minute rounds for regular fights and 5 rounds for championship fights, the standard we have today. Royce's marathon grappling also birthed the stand-up rule. Referees now reset stalled ground positions after inactivity. Without Royce, you wouldn't have the clock, rounds, or stand-ups that define modern MMA. So next time, you see the ref clapping in fighters' faces and yelling, "Work." Thank Royce Gracie for teaching the world how exhausting jiu-jitsu can be. But the final story isn't about time or grappling. It's about one elbow that got banned forever. The single most controversial strike in UFC history. Jon Jones. It looks like any other elbow until you see it drop straight down like a sledgehammer. That's the infamous 12-6 elbow, and Jon Jones is the reason you still hear about it. Let's rewind to the Ultimate Fighter 10 finale, December 2009. Jones faced Matt Hamill. For nearly 5 minutes, he mauled Hamill, takedowns, shoulder strikes, and finally, a vicious barrage of elbows from Mount. But here's the catch. Jones used a 12-6 elbow, a downward strike from the ceiling to the floor. Under the unified rules of MMA, it's explicitly banned. Why? Because the early regulators in New Jersey watched a karate demo in the 90s where a guy broke ice blocks with that motion, and they freaked out about potential spinal injuries. True story. When Jones landed the elbow, Hamill's nose exploded. Blood poured onto the canvas. The ref stopped the fight. But instead of awarding a TKO, they reviewed the replay and declared it a disqualification, the first and only official loss on Jon Jones's record. That moment created decades of debate. Why allow elbows sideways, but not straight down? Why does one angle equal legal and another equal DQ? Athletic commissions tried amending the rule, but ultimately kept it. To this day, 12-6 elbows remain banned, largely because of that single night in Vegas. Jones once joked, "I guess I'll never be undefeated because of a dumb rule." And if you think about it, he's right. His entire legacy has a footnote because of one elbow strike that regulators didn't understand. If you love the wild stories that shaped MMA, subscribe now. More raw, uncensored fight history drops soon. Comment below, who should we expose next in the world of combat sports?